Hey everyone. Welcome to Dangerous Werewolf. Are you brave enough to step into the perilous world of werewolves with me? Here, we'll uncover the secrets, face the fears, and explore the thrilling and dangerous aspects of these mythical creatures. So hold on tight and let's start this wild adventure together. Chapter 38 Amber. The way back to the pack house was quiet. Although we probably could have talked to each other through our link, we were both lost in our own thoughts. Jackie, however, seemed to be on a one-track mind of getting the pup I held to safety. The poor thing had only seemed to have just opened its eyes, but he had fallen asleep on the way back, even after we had cleaned him off. His scent still matched that of the fallen wolves that we had left behind. Alex informed me that he had let others know that there was an outback that others hadn't known about. My chest clenched in sorrow for those that had lost their lives. They were living under the trust and care of my dad, their alpha, yet were still killed without us knowing they were in danger. Easy there, Amber. Alex spoke to me softly. There's nothing we could have done. That doesn't make it right. They were on our land and rogues attacked them. They managed to get so far in. What about the patrol in the area? What about the other warriors that are supposed to be around? I know, he replied. I could sense his own frustration and anger. We just need to get home to inform the others. I nodded as best I could with the pup still in my grasp. When we reached the pack house, Alex quickly shifted and headed inside. I chose to stay outside in my wolf form. Wolf hair was a pain to manage in the pack house already had issues with it. The other reason was it would be easier to protect the pup in my wolf form should anything happen. I placed him down in front of me, causing him to wake. He looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. His scent said werewolf, yet it was odd for one so young to have shifted. Pups were born much the same as humans. We gave birth as a human to a human. Then, around the time of puberty, they would be able to shift. Alpha children usually shifted a little before then, but even that wasn't too much earlier. Events that would threaten a pup's life would cause an early shift, but even that wasn't until they were old enough to comprehend certain instances. The pup in front of me just made it hard to point his age range. He blinked once and made a small yet ping-like noise, his head tilting ever so slightly to the side. Okay, that was adorable. I leaned down and gave his head a long lick of affection. He, in turn, gave a tiny growl that a pup would make and curled up against me. I always knew you'd get the motherly type side down, Jackie teased, though it contained something of a serious tone to it. Oh, shut up. He's cute. I looked down at him, my tail covering his front as his eyes started to droop again. Yes, he really is. My wolf cooed, a soft purring coming from her. I rolled my eyes at my wolf. Dork. The pup opened his eyes again and looked up. My gaze was pulled away when Alex returned, sporting a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. He was followed by Sierra, my mom, and Sylvia. We found him by the small river that runs through our area. We never made it to the residential area, but it appears that a group of rogues had made it that far in. No trouble on the way back, Alex was explaining to them, leading them over. Sylvia was the first to make it over to me, kneeling down in front of me, her eyes on the pup. Our pack doctor reached out her hand, wanting to check the pup. He gave a soft whimper and shrunk back. My intention was to step back and let her handle it. Yet I couldn't move. Instead, the exact opposite happened. I leaned forward, placing a paw in front of him with a low, very threatening growl. It took me a moment to come to the realization that I wasn't in control. Whoa, Jackie, down girl. I cried out to her, the sudden lack of control startling me, though it happened through the link. The growl that followed made it seem like it was voiced through speakers at a concert. Back off. Sylvia bared her neck and took a step back, submitting to the strong alpha command that was given. I tried to reason with my wolf, sending comforting thoughts her way, but nothing got through to her. I could feel myself start to panic. In all my life, I never once had her take the wheel from me so quickly. I felt shut out and was genuinely afraid of what might have happened next. Sylvia and my mom all took another step back, but Alex clearly wasn't affected. He walked right up and placed his hand on top of my head, right between my ears. Warmth filled my body as he began scratching lightly, a soft growl coming from him. It's all right, Jackie. She is the pack doctor. We wouldn't let her hurt him. I wouldn't let her hurt him. His voice was soft and quiet, yet firm and confident. A moment later, it felt like a huge weight was lifted off my chest as Jackie released control. I'm sorry, was all she said before going quiet. I took a step back, but pressed myself against my mate, hoping he would keep her calm. The pup whimpered slightly at the action, but Sylvia scooped him up gently and looked over him. No broken bones or cuts. He seems perfectly healthy, she commented, switching into doctor mode rather quickly. When he shifts back, we can do more. But until then, you'll just need to keep an eye on him. Thanks, Doc, Alex said, nodding his head in acknowledgement. His hand never once left me. She bowed ever so slightly and left. Silence filled the area we stood in, everyone seeming a little uneasy towards the situation my wolf had left behind. Are you okay, Amber? My mom asked, looking rather concerned. She just seemed to realize what had happened with Jackie. I nodded slowly, not entirely certain as to what had just happened. I was very grateful to have Alex there at that moment. We'd better get inside as well, Sierra commented, looking up at the sky. It had grown dark with clouds and the scent of rain wasn't too far off. I nodded in agreement, kicking up the pup, and heading inside. He'll need a name for now, at least. We can't just keep calling him a pup, my mom said, feeding the so-said pup with a baby's bottle. Jackie hadn't lashed out afterward, and I didn't have a whole lot of experience with kids outside the few that I'd play with when they were around. So I was more than happy to let my mom help. A heavy rain shower had started and had been going on for a few hours. The rest of the patrols had alerted us that they were fine and the immediate drug issue had been resolved. They were staying inside in a packmate's place to avoid being soaked and would head back once it eased up. I was sitting with her and Alex in the living room, waiting for them to return to decide what to do next. I hadn't let my mate leave my side, knowing that if Jackie went off again about the pup, not that he seemed to mind. Thank goodness. I knew that he had issues with Xavier, and it made me realize that he felt the same lack of control more times than I could remember. And I was freaking out because Jackie did it once. I'm such a wreck sometimes. Jadon, was my mate's comment. That's his name. I looked over at him with a fairly confused look. That's rather. My mom trailed off, both of us raising an eyebrow at him. He ran a hand through his hair, letting it flop back into the exact same mess that I loved to run my fingers through. Xavier says that's his name. I honestly don't understand him sometimes. I laid my head on his shoulder. Well, it's not bad. I'm fine with that. My mom only shrugged, petting the pup's head. We'll need to find if he has any immediate family members alive. APAC may be family, but it's good to grow up in one's bloodline, or have them around. Alex nodded. We can ask after Adam and the others have returned. We'll also have to find the families of the others lost. He paused. What's wrong? I asked, sensing his discomfort. It's getting worse. I may still be a little new at all this, but anyone would realize that having an enemy so far into your territory is just bad news. They shouldn't have gotten so far, to begin with. It isn't normal, my mom told him gravely. Something else seems to be going on, but none of us can put our finger on it. Adam is worried that this is how the other pack started before they fell. He made a face. Scary thought. Very, I muttered. A loud clap of thunder made me jump. My mom and Alex tensing up. Jadon had begun withering and whimpering from his place in my mom's arms. I stood up and walked over to my mom, gently taking him from her arms and holding him close. It felt a little odd to be doing such a thing with a wolf pup, but the effect was the same that I'd hoped for with any child. He'd calm down quickly and stop stirring around. I think your wolf has imprinted on him, my mom said softly. At me. I furrowed my eyebrows. Imprinted? She nodded. It's been known to happen with orphan pups. Another female or male wolf will take them in under their wing as if they were their own. I looked at Alex, who only shrugged. What if he has other family members? An aunt or uncle? I asked, feeling a little worried about the situation. My mom smiled, placing her hand on my back. Don't worry, Amber. If you were to have other close family members, I'd honestly doubt they have any issues with you taking care of him, or of you being around should you want them to do so. We're a pack, a family. I know, but Jackie is still. I trailed off, knowing she was stirring in my mind at the thought of the pup leaving our sight. An uneasy feeling, to say the least. I knew that these things happen. It was the issue with being a werewolf that dealt with hunters and rogues. It didn't stop me from questioning things. However, as the situation hadn't ever affected me immediately. We will cross that bridge when we get to it, was her reply. She leaned and kissed my temple. I looked back at my mate, who was making a face. You okay? He seemed to snap out of his thoughts, giving me a sheepish smile. Just trying to wrap my head around it. Is all. Makes two of us. I muttered, still scratching Jade on behind his little ears. Alex stood up, stretching. I'm going to get some lunch. Y'all want anything? He offered. Whatever you're having, was my simple request. He nodded and looked at my mom. I'm fine. Thank you. Alex. He dipped his head in acknowledgement and left the room. I hope he's okay with this, I commented once he was out of earshot. My mom sat back with a small hum of thought. I'm more worried about how his wolf will take it. Gadon not being his or yours might cause issues. We'll have to keep an eye on that. I felt more uneasy at that. Praying to the moon goddess there wouldn't be. We had far too many issues going on as it was. Later that evening the patrols were able to make it back as the storm that came through had died down. A section of the warriors were sent over to Karnip to assess cause in the area. All the other boarders were secured and only a few rogues were kept in custody. The rest perished in the skirmishes they had caused. Jadon was staying the night at the pack nursery with my dad's sister, my aunt, who normally looked after orphan pups. Jackie wasn't totally thrilled with the idea, but I knew better, and having Alex around helped her remain calm. Alex and I laid next to each other, staring up at the ceiling. We hadn't said much, everything going on driving our thoughts into many directions. It was all we could really do to grasp at what needed to be done. It had only been a day or so and things were just feeling crazier by the minute. We both had school the following day, yet none of us knew how we juggle it all. I thought my dad was the alpha for a reason, I said quietly, shattering the silence that loomed over us. He is. There's just a lot to worry about. I rolled onto my side to look at him. I know this must be a mess for you. You're still new to our world, and it's like we're dragging you into the worst of it. It's not the worst thing ever, he said, turning his head to face me. It may be a mess now, but I have a feeling it won't last for too long. I gave a long sigh. If we'd met a year ago, things would have been easier. Only a few rogue issues here and there. No hunters. No weird alpha trying to get me. It was quiet and nice. I guess I wasn't needed then. Alex chuckled. He turned over as well, his eyes seemingly lost yet sharp at the same time. I felt like I could fall into them as loving gaze for eternity. What do you mean? I breathed. I came at the right time. Found you when you needed me the most. I couldn't help but snort in laughter. Don't get too cocky. He gave me a playful wink. You know you love it. Shut up. Make me. I leaned in without hesitation and pressed my lips against him, craving the warmth and electric feeling I got from him. It seemed to wash away my worries and comfort me in a way that I knew he could only do. His arm snaked around my body and I found myself flush against him once more. We'll get through this. Amber. Promise. Thanks for reading. Aust on Chapter 39, Alex. It hadn't seemed to be too long since I'd drifted off that a loud crash startled me from my fairly normal dreams. Still half asleep, I managed to stumble out of bed and see what the commotion was. I didn't even get the door halfway open before it came crashing down on me from the other side. That managed to wake me up thoroughly and I had to shift in order to push off the intruder. Once they were off, The foul stench of a rogue hit my nose, causing me to reel back towards Amber, who had only just woken up. A rogue in wolf form stood before me, although not quite my size. It was still very large and appeared to be well trained, despite the lack of pack. It didn't give me a second glance as it charged towards Amber. I easily caught the snarling mutt between my jaws and clamped down hard on its neck, the snapping sound ending it then and there then. Amber then shoved me aside as another wolf came hurling from my blind spot in the doorway, her human form being just strong enough to push us both out of the way. My claws caught the tent. I hurled myself into the second wolf, my teeth meeting nothing but fur as we crashed into the bay windows of the room and sprawled outside. Xavier was pissed off, making it a struggle to keep a hold on him. I didn't want to have to make too much of a mess, which is what he always seemed to do. The rogue lowered its head with a fierce snarl. It definitely wasn't a typical one. The growl that followed it, however, was a clear message. We'll be back. I leapt at it but only caught air as it seemed to dart off faster than any wolf I'd seen. I turned my head to see it disappear in the direction of the pack border, but I knew that if they had gotten that far into the territory, they'd have no problem making it out. That just pisses me off. Amber walked over and tugged softly on the scruff of my neck, motioning her head to follow her back inside. The moon was shining brightly and illuminated our dark room even more since the windows and parts of the wall were missing. Are you guys, whoa. I looked up to see Jack standing with a bewildered look on his face at the broken windows and the large hole that came with it. Bit of a mess, Amber muttered. My best friend frowned. Shit. We knew a couple of rogues got through, but this is ridiculous. I growled in an agitated agreement. Come on, he continued. We need to meet with the others. I followed Jack into the living room where Adam and Christine quickly turned around with a relieved look on their faces. They didn't look in the best condition either. While Christine only had a few cuts and scrapes and a torn hoodie on, Adam was missing a shirt and already had a bandage wrapped sloppily along his midsection. My dad happened to be there as well, a large wolf sitting next to him. He had a crossbow in his hand and his t-shirt had 4 very long claw marks through it. He looked fine. However, as for the wolf, the scent of it told me it was in fact my mom. I internally frowned. I thought she couldn't shift. I made eye contact with my dad and nodded a little to his side where she sat at, indicating my confusion. Later, he mouthed, "Guess we weren't the only ones." Amber asked, though it was more of a statement than a question. Adam nodded grimly. "Unfortunately so. You two all right?" I nodded with her. Xavier refused to back down, leaving me stuck in wolf form while still moving to keep him from taking over. One wrong move, or word even, and I wouldn't be able to hold him back any longer. These rogues shouldn't be making it so far into the territory so often. I growled through the link. I know, Adam gritted out. No need to point out the obvious. Well, it's the truth, Jack muttered, looking equally ticked off. I let out a long sigh. I just want all of this to be over with. Is that too much to ask? We know that, son, my dad reasoned. It's taking a toll on us all, but we will get through this. I scoffed. No offense, Dad, but why don't you try reasoning with a stubborn, overbearing wolf, eh? My mom growled in amusement, swatting his legs with her tail. Everyone in the room seemed to laugh in understanding, the tension in the room clearing a little. It will be okay, Amber said softly, running her hands through my fur in an attempt to calm me. I promise. I nodded a little, then looked up at Adam. He said Emmett and his mate were coming by. Yes, he said with a nod. They were coming by for reinforcement reasons, but I think I'm going to have to steal them from you. I think it's best to leave now. He was the only one who nodded in understanding while everyone else held a very confused expression on their faces. I'll let them know when they come. What do you mean? Leave, Paige asked. You two are coming as well. And where are we going? Tobias inquired. At first, I was going to send them to that cabin we have up north for Amber's heat. Adam told them Emmett and his mate were to accompany them for safety. But with recent events occurring, We believe it might be best to send them off for their safety for now. He then turned to me. But why those two as well? Paige knows about some of the family hunter abilities of mine, and I need to know more about them. Also, she knows how to shift with having clothes on. I saw that rogue do it as well, and it could use as an advantage point. If I had gear or something strapped to it, I would bring just her. But knowing Tobias, he isn't going to let her out of his sight. The more manpower the better. At any rate, damn right I won't. He growled. I gave Adam a look that said, "See my point?" Adam nodded a little with a sigh. 6 of you will be gone. Though, I'm only worried about that. Dad, our pack is huge. I think we will be okay with us gone. And if things get too bad, we will come back here and help. Hopefully it won't. But if it does, by then we'll be ready as well. Adam sighed, looking very unsure of it, but nodded in the end. All right. I'll let them know when they get here. In the meantime, I want you two to go and pack. He looked at Paige and Tobias. That goes for you two as well. The 4 of us nodded and left the room, leaving everyone else still in the large living room. I couldn't help but pick up on the conversation as we left. But is it really for the best? My dad asked. After seeing what Paige can do, we can only guess what power Alex might hold. Yes, but you already saw how on edge his wolf was. If he stays, Xavier might become too much for him. Christine said, Xavier is the one I'm worried about. Adam trailed off. There's something behind him that's more than meets the eye. He's strong, more so than a normal alpha. He is an unusual wolf side to have. I just hope the moon goddess knows what she's doing. Christine said with an edge of annoyance. The rest of their conversation was cut off by Amber closing the door to our room. The window pane had already been covered by some basic construction sheets. But I knew there wasn't a point in complaining since we would be heading off shortly to begin with. On the bright side, we got to skip school. Again. You okay, Alex? She asked, turning to me. I looked up at her, then away for a moment. I'm honestly not sure. She got down onto her knees and hugged my neck again. We'll get through this. I know we will. I nodded, then shifted back, taking charge earlier, and now being alone with my mate must have helped Xavier calm down. I looked up to see Amber blushing wildly. What's got you turning so scarlet? I asked innocently. She glared at me. You know damn well what. No, I don't think I do. I teased. Would you care to enlighten me? Amber let out a huff and turned around. I smirked and brought her back into my chest, wrapping my arms around her stomach. She seemed to relax, but was still blushing tomato red. I teased her again by nuzzling my mark on her neck, causing a shudder to pass through her body. Hey, Alex, come on, she said, trying to pull away. We need to get ready. Oh, I know. But later tonight, you're all mine. Amber rolled her eyes, muttering something about horny male werewolves. I just laughed and got my stuff together. Thankfully, the rest of the night was warm enough to not have to worry about our broken room. Emmett and his mate, Ariel, had also showed up early the following morning. The 4 of us sat on the stools in the kitchen, eating breakfast. Tobias ate like there wasn't a problem in the world. Paige was simply quiet. Amber was holding a whimpering Jadon, and I just sat there picking at my food. Most of the time I wouldn't have any problems, but today just felt like it was the end of the world. Xavier being quieter than ever before wasn't helping either. Hey, it's not the end of the world. You know, Paige said, nudging my side. Tobias had finished and was washing dishes and Amber went to ask Christine something regarding Jadon. I shrugged. And someone tell me why it feels that way. Because you're nervous. I'm not nervous. She gave me a look. Yes, you are. If not nervous, then worried. I'm not worried either, and that's where I call bullshit. You're worried that something will happen to Amber. That something will happen to the pack while we're gone. Or the fact that you're going to fail somebody or everyone in one way or another. I gave her a sheepish look. Paige only laughed, pulling me into a one-armed hug. Hey, it's okay. I was there once before myself. You didn't have a whole pack to worry about. Or one of the oddest inner wolves in the history of werewolves. Maybe not. But mind you, everyone has different challenges they have to face. No one's is ever spot on in similarity, but they just may be in level of difficulty. I looked at her. And what's made you the philosopher? Paige laughed. Life, little brother. Life has. I rolled my eyes, feeling a little better, and walked over to Amber, who had just then returned. She gave me a warm smile and wrapped her arms around me. She leaned into me, giving a reassuring growl, and looked up at me. As much as it pains me to ask this, we're going to have to leave Jade on here, aren't we? I nodded. It's for the best. Don't worry. I'm sure our moms will take care of him just fine, or spoil the hell out of him. They're not the only ones, Jack said, walking into the room. Sierra right behind him. Great, great. Now I'm going to have a spoiled pup when we get back. I teased. Like you wouldn't. Sierra challenged. Not as bad as you lot would. Amber shot back at her playfully. I laughed and gave Sierra and Jack a quick hug. We'll be back soon. So, don't do too much while we're gone. We can try, but no promises. Jack laughed. I shook my head with amusement and went to the living room where Emmett and Ariel sat. Emmett was about 6'1" with sandy blonde hair chopped short and uneven. Emmett didn't exactly look buff, but he wasn't skinny either. It was like he was trained in stealth and agility. He wore a tight black leather material that looked suited for combat. Dark, sleek military-like pants, combat boots, and some type of thin body armor to go over it all. He had a type of machete strapped to his back and a pistol on his hip. I had to say, it made me feel weak and pathetic in comparison to him, and I probably would have if it wasn't for his warm smile that he held whenever he was around those he loved. Ariel, on the other hand, was a petite black-haired girl that didn't look a day over 25. She looked to be about 5'8", with raven black hair tied back into a single ponytail, a light green tee, tan cargo pants, and combat boots as well. I also noticed a gun on her hip as well, but nothing more, though she had very kind eyes, and a personality that would make it impossible for you to not get along. I had a deep feeling that I didn't ever want to get on her bad side. Amber, how are you? Lass. Emmett smiled at Amber as she walked into the room. Uncle Emmett. She gave him a hug. It's been too long. So it has, my dear. So it has. Amber, nice to see you as always. Ariel beamed, hugging her as well. And you must be Alex, Emmett said, turning to me. I nodded. Emmett, I've heard a lot about you. He laughed. Likewise. Mate, in all honesty, you're not what I expected. Though, I tilted my head a little nervously. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That, my friend, is a good thing. I expected you to be a little more scrawny. I raised an eyebrow. Seriously. He nodded. All Adam told me was that you needed some training. Amber laughed. Yeah. Emmett gave her a confused look. He's beaten all of our top class fighters, and still keeps going. She explained. Couldn't even walk straight the other day. Emmett laughed at that. I know how that feels. Well, well. At least now I know I won't be training a weakling. I rubbed the back of my head sheepishly. It was going to be very interesting to say the least. Is that everything? Emmett asked, putting in the last of our bags. It wasn't much as it was, which probably explained the surprise in his voice. I had a bag of clothes, and a backpack with a couple of weapons. Amber had all her weapons and clothes in a single larger bag, but it was probably the smallest bag ever seen a girl bring on a trip. It looks like, I said, looking back at the pack house. Then we'd better hit the road. It's not too long of a trip, but I'd rather get there sooner than later, Emmett said, closing the trunk of the old Grand Cherokee Jeep we were taking. I turned to Amber, who was still holding Jade on close. I gently put a hand on her shoulder. Hey, we're not saying goodbye for good. You know. She nodded. I know, but still, I know, but it's for the best that we leave him. Besides, he's in the best care we've got. Not going to know what to do with him when we come back. Best leave now then. I teased. Amber elbowed me in the side. Be nice. You know I can't help the connection I have with him. Think of it as experience. How are you going to handle it if something like this happens when we have our own pups? Hopefully we won't. She growled a little. I rolled my eyes. Come on, Amber. We got to go. She nodded and placed him in Sierra's arms, who in turn gave her a wide smile. We'll keep him out of trouble. Promise. Amber nodded, then got into the Jeep. I looked at Adam as he approached. You remember our talk about this trip? I nodded. Would be hard to forget it. He nodded once. I'm trusting you to keep them safe. Alex. Not just Amber, but all of them. You're more powerful than you think. Even if no one else knows it yet. All I'm asking is that you all come back in one piece. You hear me? I wouldn't have it any other way. I smiled. Adam stuck out his hand and I shook it. See you in a few weeks, he said. And good luck. Thanks. I'll need it. I hopped into the Jeep right as we started to drive off. I didn't know what I would return to, but I only hoped that everything would be okay. The cabin turned out to be just that. It was a small log cabin that had 2 rooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen, a dining room, and a living room. I grabbed our bags out of the back and walked inside, taking the room that Amber had already picked out. Once I got everything settled in, I walked into the living room where Emmett sat waiting for me. Are you ready to begin? He asked me. I looked at him, confused. Training now. He nodded. Yes, now. Those rogues aren't going to wait for you to return with some highly skilled backup. Once they know you're gone, they're going to go after your pack. The sooner we start, the better. I growled, then looked up at him. What are we doing first? Every wolf is only as strong as the weakest member of their pack. Every person is only as strong as the person next to them. I believe you're only as good as your worst skill. I gulped. Archery. A very mischievous grin spread across his face. You'd be right. This was going to be a long few weeks. Not a very long chapter for all these crazy events. But I do hope y'all are enjoying it though. Keep reading, loving, fanning, voting, and everything else y'all do best. K.E. Rick Chapter 40. Alex, the blindfold around my eyes was a dark one. I couldn't see anything of any sort around me. Amber's cries were starting to get to my wolf, and it was only a matter of time before you lost the true reality around us and attacked. Alex, her heart-wrenching cry called. Go to mate. Xavier howled in my head, the headache becoming worse. She is in trouble, and you know it. I snapped back. Mate. I rolled my eyes and tried my best to block out Amber's cries for help. I couldn't quite get far of reaching out my senses when Xavier was battling me the whole way. I only got a few feet before he howled again, throwing me off. If you do not have the control of your wolf, then you do not have your full advantage. Emmett said in an even tone as he paced behind me. You don't know how hard it is to get him to listen. I growled back. And he'd most likely be dead by now since you can't. If he isn't on your side, being a werewolf means nothing. I simply growled. Perhaps you need more of an incentive, he said, walking away from me. Curious, I stopped what I was doing. Xavier quieted just barely after Amber stopped her fake wailing. I turned my head, trying to detect any sound to give me clues to what was going on. I couldn't move quite far. My ankles and wrists tied together. I heard a sharp slap, followed by Amber's cry of pain. Only this time, it seemed more real. The leather binding my hands began to strain as I tried to push Xavier back down. I had no clue if that was real or not. Emmett had promised to not hurt Amber, but I knew if he did, she wasn't exactly weak. Xavier, on the other hand, wanted nothing more than blood. No matter what was going on. Use the fire that your wolf burns. instead of letting it out and allowing him to take over. Bend it to your will, allow it to be Ray, directed into strength. I barely registered his words. The leather finally snapping. My hands turned into claws long enough to tear the binding of my feet. Before running toward Emmett, only the stupid side of me kicked in, forgetting to take off the blindfold, as he only stepped to the side, causing me to stumble over uneven ground and fall forward. I jumped back up to swing at him but missed yet again. Instead, Emmett struck by leaning back to grab my arm and put me quickly into a very painful arm bar. If you let your emotions or your wolf get the better of you, it will cloud your mind and leave you vulnerable to your enemy, he instructed, before shoving me to the ground. You may take off your blindfold now, we'll continue this tomorrow. Quickly ripping it off, I ran over to Amber and held her tightly in my arms. Alex, she squeaked. Can't breathe. I loosened my hold on her but didn't say anything. You know he never hurt me, right? I looked at her, smiling sheepishly. Yeah, I do. But you're a damned good actor. I was telling that to Xavier, she said cheekily, seeing as how he was in more distress than I was. I only shrugged, pulling her inside with me. It had been for weeks since we arrived up here. Emmett had me doing 3 things this whole trip: eating, sleeping, and training. One of the major training ideas that he had worked with was using Amber. Of course, she was never harmed, but instead pretend to be so Xavier would become very, very, very pissed off. Emmett said if worse came to worse, and whomever this alpha was actually got her, I would need to take every bit of anger and despair Xavier had, and turn it into the strength of mind, body, and will. I personally thought that Emmett was an idiot for all of this. I mean, seriously, who does that to an alpha wolf? Was he wishing for a death sentence? If it wasn't Emmett training me in one way or another, it was my older sister. Since we had been up here, I had been able to master shifting with clothing, a helpful ability that left Amber jealous, and something about not seeing my ABS, whatever that was about. Another ability was what born hunters called stealth. Stealth was an ability to move extremely fast, without bearing any scent or making any noise. It basically made me like a ninja, without needing the cover of night. Amber became extremely jealous at that point, complaining how she couldn't become the ninja she had always wanted to be. I, on the other hand, found it rather pointless as wolves normally engaged in full-fledged combat. Especially alphas. Archery was still a small issue, but I was getting better at it. My accuracy had increased 10-fold, but my speed was horrible. Tobias and I were the only ones that actually used guns, leaving us both bored when the rest practiced. And every time it was hand-to-hand combat, it was the 2 of us against Emmett, who still won every round. After learning to shift with clothes on, Emmett had me start wearing an army-looking body armor that had a bunch of metal and foam pads in it. It came in handy when sparring with him and Tobias and Ariel on occasion, as it allowed me to slowly build up against taking blows from the wolves. The days continued on, to weeks soon turning 3, then into 4. After Adam contacted us through Emmett's satellite phone, informing us of nothing happening there, Emmett informed him he would be staying for another 3. I only hoped that we were not pushing our luck. With little to no communication from our pack and no word of another attack, I had started to worry, and to think that they knew we had left. They were simply waiting for our return. If you don't put that will of yours into it, you will never be as strong as you need to be, Emmett said roughly, blocking yet another punch, only to kick me in the stomach yet again. I swung a kick up to his head, but he just ducked it, then kicked out my knee, pushing me down to my knees. I was about to get up, but a blow to the head had me down in the dirt again. We were going at it like this for a while in our human forms, me getting a few hits in here and there, but Emmett mostly kicking my ass the whole way down. You may have mastered your wolf form, but what if you cannot shift? What good will you be if you cannot fight? Emmett had told me earlier. Since then, we've been going at it non-stop. I was starting to feel the fatigue settle in, but Emmett was like a machine. He kept going just as hard as when he had started. Every blow that I had managed to land only resulted in triple as many against myself. If it were ever a deadly fight, I would have been long gone. I had finally had him in a position that would have worked, but his foot slid away from me, kicking out my leg. I tried to get on the balls of my feet to spin around, but was hit by his elbow to the back of my head, effectively knocking me to the ground once more. Emmett, I know it's training and all, but do you mind not giving him brain damage? He's barely house-trained as it is. Amber teased, feeling the love. Amber, I said with a grunt as I got up. I'm really feeling the love. She laughed, walking up to me. I love you too. I stood up straight and looked at the sky. Besides, Paige says it's dinner time anyway. Enough training, Amber said sternly to her uncle. Emmett only nodded, then looked back at me. You're doing well, I must admit. Perhaps after all of this is over, you would still train with me. When I feel the need to be acquainted with the ground, I'll be sure to call you up. Emmett merely smiled. I've been trained for 8 years and continue to do so. You've been under training for less than 2 months. Give yourself even 2 years and I have a feeling that you could beat me. Curious for a moment, I looked back at him as we continued to walk inside. Have you ever sparred with Adam? He nodded. Many times. My friend. Many times. However, never with him in human form. Practicing your rogue hunting. Another nod. It helps when they aren't trying to kill you. I gave a nervous laugh. That could get nerve-wracking. Oh yes, Ariel said as she approached us. And it's really bad when you're on the run from some rogues and your heat kicks in. Amber winced. Yikes. Sounds almost as bad as. Yeah, trust me, it's not going to be nearly as bad. The she-wolf assured her. It was just the 2 of us. And we had been under stress. You've not only got Alex, but you've got for Hailey. And I stress the Hailey part. Trained werewolves to watch your back. It's all good. My mate smiled widely, leaning into my side. Thanks. Ariel simply shrugged. Hey, I just speak the truth. Mind you, the truth sucks sometimes. Tobias said as we all sat down for dinner. We can especially speak for that. Paige said, then frowned. What are we talking about? I shook my head in amusement, looking up at her. You should have taken Mom's blonde hair color. That's what. Coming from the kid that found out what he was for years later than I did. I rolled my eyes. Well, you're pulling that card. She nodded. I mean honestly. Your wolf didn't tell you. Did yours? Emmett countered casually. Yet though. It was after I turned 15. Speaking of our inner wolves. Tobias spoke up, looking at me. Aside from training, how's the mysterious Xavier been? I only shrugged, taking a bite of mashed potatoes to give me a moment to think. He's been really quiet. I don't know what's up. You can stop talking to me like I'm not here. Alex, so nice of you to join us. I told him dryly, then looked up. Scratch that. He's up. I only sleep when you do. It's weird hearing you when you're not all aggressive and primal. My sister narrowed her eyes at me. Speaking of Xavier, I've got a bone to pick with him. What? Tobias nodded from next to her. After everything that's been happening, Sylvia informing us of your night terrors, and a small bunch of other instances, Xavier clearly isn't ordinary. In fact, we think he's a traveler. Emmett's eyes widened, slowly making their way to me. No way. Yes way. Paige growled lowly. Spit it out. You wolf. I know you can hear me. Silence filled the room, but only for a moment. I could be heard through the link, before Xavier's voice was heard. I guess I've been caught. Xavier, Amber asked, looking at me. My lips hadn't been moving either. Bingo. Another long silence. How are you doing that? I asked him. So you do have a voice of reason. Well, how do I put it? Oh yes. I'm different, unlike the rest of you. I'm not just a pup. A chorus of growls filled the link. Everyone taking offense to be called a pup. Get off your high horses. Sure, your human side may no longer be that way, but your wolves still are nothing but newborns compared to me. All right then. Maybe you'd care to fill us in as to what you mean. Emmett spoke up. As much as I would like to stay in the dark, I think it's time to shed some light. You see, Alex here isn't the first one to have me. Have you? Paige asked. What the hell does that mean? A wolf within a human is typically a spirit that is able to take form through anamorphosis. That's the old definition. Although no one uses it anymore, it's still there. My name is Xavier Colby K, and I have been through many beings within my existence. What's a traveler? Amber asked, looking as confused as I'd felt. It was Ariel that spoke. A traveler is a spirit that never dies with its human. When each werewolf is born, the moon goddess allows one of her spirits to bond with it. Until the age when they shift, the spirit remains dormant within the werewolf, growing up along with it. Once shifted, the spirit comes forth, and we know that spirit as our inner wolves. When we die, typically we go with our wolf spirit to wherever the afterlife chooses to take us. Travelers, however, don't go with our human spirit. In fact, typically selected by the moon goddess, the spirit of the wolf finds a new werewolf to bond with. Thus, they tend to grow over thousands of years old, depending on what fate lays in store for them. They only reveal themselves and what they are in a time of great need, for their knowledge is beyond us. So, Xavier, Emmett said, looking at me, do you know when you first came to be? Believe it or not, I do, he said, and I could almost imagine him nodding. The year 1354, if I'm not mistaken. Emmett gave a low whistle. It's been a while since I heard of one that's lived on that long. Yes, the ones that reach this long are few. I was only able to make it this long due to the fact that I kept myself secret from everyone else. You are all only the third group I have revealed myself to. And let me guess. Tobias began. You were able to do this trick sometime down the road. This trick, as you put it, is easily acquired by your own wolf as well. Tobias. But none of you know it since you're all still young. I'll let you know ahead of time that your wolf is in the doghouse. Amber muttered. I had a hunch Jackie wasn't liking how he kept referring her to a pup. Mind you, I don't mean to come off sounding rude, nor am I trying to insult you. Abilities simply become so as we get older. Think of it as puberty for humans. You don't get certain things until you're older. I had to hold back a laugh as I could practically hear Amber's wolf huff in frustration. So why are you coming forth as of now? Emmett asked. There was a sigh from Xavier. If you all wouldn't mind. It is a bit of a story behind my reasoning. There has been one wolf that I have faced a long time ago. A very dark and powerful one. His name is Falcon. Although he has been a traveler for a few hundred years. I don't know where his spirit came from, but it wasn't from the goddess. I was the only one in my first life to find out what he really was. So you personally know him? Tobias inquired. Yes, in my first life. He was my beta. When we were younger, we played together very frequently. Our human counterparts were practically inseparable. It was like having a brother, someone I could always count on. When the time came, we both became very lucky to find our mates around the same time. My younger sister was his mate and mine was an alpha's daughter of a very small neighboring pack. Lillian was her name. His voice softened when he spoke, remembering it caused him a terrible pain. Her father was more than happy to join our packs when he learned of our bond. With her by my side along with my best friend and his mate, we were all truly happy. Not but 6 months later my father stepped down as the alpha and passed the role to me. I, of course, appointed my best friend as my beta, for he had not only been by my side, but he was a strong wolf as well. A leader and a compassionate wolf. Together, we made our pack strong. A pack standard sought by many, but the faith, of course, had a different plan in mind. When leading a strong pack, one must also fear the envious. The small group of rogues used a terrible thunderstorm we encountered to cover themselves from our patrols. We never knew the reason, but they chose to attack us that night. Only a few of us were injured, but among those few was Falcon's mate. Caroline, my sister. She was pregnant with his pups during the attack, and one of them managed to tear into her back quite badly. As it was the time before modern medicine, we could only patch her up and expect her wolf side to take care of the rest. Yet, much to our horror, a great illness swept into her and she never made it to the next moon. Falcon, my best friend, had lost both his mate and his pup. He let silence fall upon us once again, seeming to gather himself from the grief that had woven into his voice. I sent out hundreds of warriors afterward, seething in anger and despair. My sister and I were very close to each other, always had a smile, and was someone that would put a smile on any wolf's face. I took it badly, but I still had my mate to help me. Falcon, however, did not. He was an only child and his parents had died a few years before he became beta. While my mate and I did our best, along with all of our pack members, we couldn't keep him out of the darkness that had begun to consume him. He would go missing for hours on end, sometimes weeks before I'd know where he was. But he was still your beta, Paige said in disbelief. He still had a responsibility to the pack. That's what we thought had kept him alive, until strange things started happening around our pack. Terrible plagues, foamy chefs from the nearby towns and farms, and several floods that had us questioning to stay or to leave. We had begun feeling like we were cursed, lost to despair and desperation. Falcon had begun toying with the arts of the goddess we knew as Nocturne. Unlike the moon goddess, she was the goddess of vampires and the dark side of magic. Magic? I asked. You guys had magic. What else do you think allows us to bind and to shift? I paused, never actually questioning what had allowed those things to be possible. Valid point. After we learned the cause behind his disappearances and our strange happenings, he was confronted and banished. For the following year, things returned to normal. Life moved on. I had learned that my own mate became pregnant and I couldn't have been happier. Then, Falcon returned. His return to our lands was with a huge army of rogues. Despite our strong pack, they outnumbered us at least 50-1. My mate was kidnapped during one of the battles and I didn't get to her until only a small handful of us were left. By the time I got to my mate, it had been far too late. Falcon had started to spew nonsense about how if I'd been a better alpha, then his mate wouldn't have died. That I had brought it all upon myself from banishing him. But you were just a wolf within your human counterpart, weren't you? Emmett asked. He grunted and thought. Things were a little different back then. We were one and the same. There's more division in these times. Anyway, those of us that were left from the attack managed to corner him on a cliff that overlooked an ocean. I remember we had many special occasions there because of the view, but had to be careful for the drop was several stories high. Falcon clearly saw the attack coming because he had Lillian there with him. Before I could save my mate, he drove a sword through her heart and cast her off the cliff that we had enjoyed as a pack so long ago. Afterward, I found myself diving into madness in the same manner that he had. Only it was after the man that I had once trusted my life with. The pack that I once was a proud alpha to had gone from a strong 400 to a mere 12 members. By that point, we chose to disband and move on with our own paths, none of the others wanting to remember the loss of all the ones they held dear. I, on the other hand, was still driven by the blood rage to find Falcon and have him answer for his chaotic betrayal. It was a few weeks later that I managed to find Falcon, only to learn that he'd been luring me into yet another trap. Driven by madness, we found ourselves in a brutal conflict, only to end with him in the victory. Of our few lifetimes together, it has always ended this way, losing my pack and mate time after time again. After his story had ended, all we could seem to do is sit there, the quiet reprieve letting us process all that he had said. Even I could feel my mate's wolf crying out softly towards him, equally feeling the sorrow he'd endured for so long. I became a traveler in hopes of bringing him down for the last time. The moon goddess has granted me that much. I want to bury him with my past and move on. But why now? Why come forth now? Tobias asked again, breaking through the somber mood. Falcon's power, his madness, has even turned the purest of minds into dark ones when they shift for the first time. Would I come to a new life? Someone else is sacrificed to bear him. I fear that this new alpha of rogues we are facing has Falcon as his wolf. Thank you all so much for joining me on this dangerous werewolf journey. I hope you had your hearts pumping and your minds racing. Don't forget to subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and come back for more exciting and dangerous tales. Until next time, stay safe and keep that adventurous spirit alive.